I thought the biggest fight would be the guilt-tripping phone calls. I assumed the worst-case scenario involved my mom crying and my dad calling me selfish. I did not know my sister was about to turn my 1 week of freedom into a police report, a corporate investigation, and a courtroom moment that would split our family in two. The scariest part was not that she unpacked my suitcase, it was that she went straight for my identity. My name is Amelia Cooper. I am 33 years old, and if you looked at my calendar 3 days ago, you would have seen a woman who had her life completely under control. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, a city where the winters are long enough to freeze your soul and the summers are humid enough to melt it back down. I work as an operations lead at Northline Event Works, which is a corporate way of saying that I am a professional chaos wrangler. My job involves taking the panic of other people, bottling it up, and turning it into seamless conferences and perfectly timed product launches. I am very good at it. I am also completely burnt out. I do not use that term lightly. When I say burnt out, I do not mean I needed a long weekend or a spa day. I mean that for the last 3 years, I have been running on a fuel mixture consisting entirely of black coffee, cortisol, and a crushing sense of obligation. I had not taken a real vacation, a trip where I did not check my email or put out a fire remotely since I was 29. My shoulders lived in a permanent state of tension somewhere around my earlobes. My eye had developed a twitch that kicked in every time my Outlook notification pinged. I was a high-functioning machine, but the gears were grinding, and I knew that if I did not stop, something was going to break. That is why Monterey, California, was not just a trip, it was a medical necessity. I had planned this vacation with the precision of a military operation. I had booked the flights 6 months in advance to get the best seats. I had reserved a boutique hotel room with a fireplace and a view of the harbor. The kind of room that cost $400 a night, but was worth every penny because it promised silence. I had paid for excursions up front, including a whale-watching tour and a reservation at a seafood restaurant that usually had a 3-month waiting list. My paid time off request had been approved, signed, and locked into the system. I had even drafted my out-of-office email. It was sitting in my drafts folder, waiting to be sent at 5 p.m. on Friday. It was a masterpiece of polite unavailability. It said, in professional terms, that I would not exist for 7 days. I was ready. I had 3 days left before my flight. My suitcase was open on my bed, half packed with sweaters and books I had been meaning to read since 2023. I was actually humming. I never hum. I felt a rare, fragile sense of peace settling over my apartment. Then my phone rang. The caller ID said Kelsey Ward. Kelsey is my older sister. She is 36. She has 2 children under the age of 7, and she possesses a terrifying talent for turning the concept of family into a trapdoor. You know the type. She does not ask for favors. She creates situations where saying no makes you the villain. She operates on a frequency of frantic entitlement that usually wears people down within the first 30 seconds of a conversation. I stared at the phone. A small knot of dread formed in my stomach. Right where my excitement had been sitting a moment ago, I considered letting it go to voicemail. I should have let it go to voicemail, but the conditioning of a lifetime is hard to break. I answered. Hello, I said. There was no greeting. There was never a greeting with Kelsey. She skipped right to the logistical demands, as if we were already in the middle of a conversation she was having in her head. So here is the plan, Kelsey said, her voice breathless and loud, like she was walking fast or wrangling a toddler. You are staying at my house all week. You need to come over Monday morning around 7 to get the key and the schedule for the kids, because Brent and I have this opportunity to go to a couples retreat in Wisconsin, and it is strictly no kids allowed. It is huge for us. Amelia, we really need this. I blinked at the wall. The audacity was so breathtaking that for a second, I could not even speak. She wasn't asking. She was deploying me. She viewed my life not as a separate existence with its own gravitational pull, but as a satellite orbiting her needs. Kelsey, I said, keeping my voice steady, I am leaving town on Monday. There was a pause on the line. Then she laughed. It was a dismissive, airy sound, the kind of laugh you give a child who says they are going to be an astronaut when they grow up. It was a laugh that said my plans were adorable but ultimately fictional. "Don't be silly," she said. "I know you like to say you are busy, but this is an emergency. It is for my marriage. Amelia, Mom said you did not have any big work events this week. I checked with her." My grip on the phone tightened. Of course she had checked with Mom. My mother, Diane, acted as Kelsey's personal intelligence agency. "I am not talking about work," I said, walking over to my suitcase and staring down at my folded clothes. "I have a flight to California on Monday morning. I booked this trip 6 months ago. I have spent thousands of dollars. I am not babysitting." "You can reschedule," Kelsey said instantly. The speed of her dismissal was like a slap. "California isn't going anywhere. This retreat is a one-time offer. Brent's boss owns the cabin and he just offered it to us. If we don't go now, we lose the chance. You can go to the beach anytime. You are single. You have all the free time in the world." There it was, the weaponized singleness. The assumption that because I did not have a husband or children, my time was a void waiting to be filled by her chaos. "No," I said. "I cannot reschedule. The bookings are non-refundable. I am going to Monterey. You will have to find someone else." "There is no one else," her voice pitched up, abandoning the breezy tone for her signature panic. "You are the aunt. You are supposed to help. I cannot believe you are being this rigid over a vacation. It is just a vacation. Amelia, this is my life. And this is my life," I said. "I am hanging up now. Kelsey, I have to finish packing." I hung up. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from a sudden, white-hot spike of rage. I stood there in my quiet apartment, looking at the neatly stacked travel-sized toiletries, trying to breathe. I had about 45 minutes of silence before the flying monkeys arrived. The first call came from my mother, Diane, then my father, Richard, then a text from Kelsey, then my mother again. It was a coordinated assault. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the nightstand while I continued to fold my shirts. I needed to pack. If I stopped packing, I might actually give in. And I would rather walk into traffic than give in this time. "Amelia," my mother's voice filled the room, sounding tearful and disappointed. "Your sister called me. She is devastated. How can you be so cold? She is exhausted. You know how hard it is for her with the boys." "I am exhausted too." "Mom," I said, placing a pair of hiking boots into the bottom of the suitcase. "I have been working 60-hour weeks for 3 years. I need this break." "But this is family," my father chimed in. He was on the other extension. "Family comes first. That is how we raised you. You can take a trip later. Kelsey needs you now. Why do you have to be so selfish?" Selfish, that was the magic word. It was the battering ram they used whenever I established a boundary. In the Cooper family dictionary, selfish was defined as any action taken by Amelia that does not directly benefit Kelsey. "I am not canceling," I said. I felt a strange calmness settling over me, a layer of ice over the fire. "I have told you about this trip for months. I sent you the itinerary. I told you I would be gone. Kelsey knew. She just ignored it because she thought she could bully me into changing my plans at the last minute. It is not happening." "You are choosing a hotel room over your nephew's," my mother said, her voice dropping to a whisper, intended to make me feel small. "I hope you enjoy your view. Amelia, I hope it is worth breaking your sister's heart." "It will be," I said. "I love you both. I will talk to you when I get back." I ended the call. I turned off the ringer. I looked at my phone, watching the screen light up silently as Kelsey called again, and again, and again, 12 times in 10 minutes. Then the texts started rolling in, walls of text, accusations, guilt trips, emojis of broken hearts. I did not argue anymore. I did not engage. I simply continued to pack. I checked my flight status. On time. I checked my bank account to make sure my travel funds were ready. I put my noise-canceling headphones in my carry-on bag. I decided right then and there I am going anyway. They could scream. They could cry. They could call me every name in the book. I was getting on that plane. I was going to drink wine by a fire and watch whales breach in the Pacific Ocean. And I was not going to think about Northline Event Works or Kelsey's childcare crisis for 7 glorious days. I felt a surge of triumph as I zipped my suitcase shut. I thought the worst was over. I thought I had weathered the storm. I thought the biggest fight would be the guilt-tripping phone calls and the awkward Thanksgiving dinner we would have to endure in November. I was so naive. I did not understand yet that the silence that followed the barrage of calls wasn't a retreat. It was a tactical pause. I thought Kelsey was just throwing a tantrum, that she would eventually call a babysitter or stay home. I didn't realize that for Kelsey. This wasn't an argument to be won or lost. It was an insult to be avenged. She wasn't trying to win the argument anymore. She was setting up the punishment. And as I slept that night, dreaming of the California coast, my sister was already awake, looking at a screen, and beginning to dismantle my life. If you want to understand how a sister becomes an identity thief, you have to stop looking at the crime scene and start looking at the history. Violence in families rarely begins with a blow. It begins with a dynamic. It starts with a role you are assigned before you are old enough to know you are acting, and it ends when you finally refuse to read the script. There was a time when Kelsey was not my adversary. In fact, if you go back 20 years, she was my shield. I remember being 13 years old, crying in the passenger seat of her beat-up Honda Civic because a group of girls in my gym class had decided my hair was too frizzy and my clothes were too generic. Kelsey, then 16 and radiating the terrifying confidence of a high school junior, did not tell me to ignore them. She drove straight to the milkshake stand where they hung out, walked up to the ringleader, and whispered something in her ear that made the girl turn pale. Kelsey never told me what she said. She just bought me a chocolate shake, drove me home, and told me that Cooper women do not cry over people who peaked in middle school. She was the cool big sister. She was the protector. That version of Kelsey is why I stayed on the hook for so long. I spent decades trying to find traces of that girl inside the woman who now viewed me as a disgruntled employee. The shift did not happen overnight. It was a slow, corrosive chemical reaction that began the moment she became a mother. I love my nephews. I love them with a fierce, protective intensity. But their arrival turned Kelsey into a person who keeps score like it is an Olympic sport. And I was always losing a game I did not know I was playing. It started with the subtle weaponization of fatigue. Because Kelsey was a mother, her exhaustion was treated as holy water. It sanctified everything she did. Because I was single and childless, my exhaustion was treated as a hobby. If I was tired after a 50-hour work week, it was just because I had stayed up too late watching movies. If she was tired, it was a systemic failure of the universe that required immediate restitution from everyone around her. The requests began as favors. A text at 4 p.m. asking if I could pick up the boys because she was stuck in traffic. A request to watch them for 2 hours on a Saturday so she could get a haircut. I said yes, because that is what sisters do. I said yes because I remembered the Honda Civic and the chocolate shake. But reliability is a dangerous quality to possess in a dysfunctional family. Reliability is not rewarded. It is exploited. If you are the person who always fixes the problem, you eventually become the only tool they reach for. By the time I was 30, the requests had morphed into demands wrapped in guilt. The traffic excuse vanished. It became, I need you to take the boys because I just cannot deal with them right now. If I hesitated, the scorecard came out. Must be nice, she would say, her voice dripping with that specific, curdled envy. Must be nice to just worry about yourself. Must be nice to sleep in. Must be nice to have disposable income. She looked at my life, my quiet apartment, my career, my weekends, and she did not see a different set of choices. She saw a reservoir of resources that she was entitled to tap because she had it harder. In her mind, my free time was not actually mine. It was just unused inventory waiting to be requisitioned for her operations. I tried to set boundaries. About 2 years ago, I told her I could not watch the kids for a weekend she wanted to spend at a spa because I had a project launch. The reaction was not anger, it was a punishment of silence. She did not speak to me for 3 weeks. She uninvited me from a family barbecue. When I finally saw her, she acted as if I had physically wounded her, sighing heavily and talking about how alone she felt in the world. And then there was Brent. My brother-in-law is a man who has mastered the art of strategic neutrality, publicly. He stays out of it. He shrugs when Kelsey snaps at me. He looks at his phone when the guilt trips start. But Brent always benefits. When I spent my Saturdays babysitting so they could have a date night, Brent enjoyed the steak dinner just as much as she did. When I paid for the pizza because they were tight this month, despite their 2 new cars, Brent ate the pepperoni. He realized early on that if he let Kelsey be the attack dog, he could enjoy the spoils of the hunt without getting blood on his hands. He was not a victim of her behavior. He was a silent partner. My parents were the enablers who greased the wheels of this machine. Diane and Richard Cooper are not malicious people. They are simply conflict-averse. They operate on the path of least resistance. In physics, electricity flows through the circuit with the least opposition in our family. Anxiety flows toward the person least likely to scream. Kelsey screams. Kelsey cries. Kelsey withholds access to the grandchildren. I reason. I compromise. I absorb. So, whenever Kelsey made a demand, my parents would turn to me, not to tell Kelsey to be reasonable, but to tell me to be flexible. Just do it this one time, my dad would say, looking tired. It is easier than listening to her yell. She is under so much pressure, my mom would add, ignoring the dark circles under my own eyes. Be the bigger person, Amelia. I had been the bigger person for so long that I felt like I was shrinking. That is why this trip to Monterey was different. It was not a spur-of-the-moment escape. I knew the pattern. I knew that if I left a single inch of ambiguity, Kelsey would invade it. So, I had been explicitly clear, 3 months ago, at Sunday dinner. I laid it all out. We were eating pot roast at my parents' dining table. Kelsey was there. Brent was there. I brought up the photos of the hotel on my phone. I passed it around. I am booking this for the 3rd week of January, I had said, my voice clear and distinct. I have already put in the deposit. It is non-refundable. I will be completely off the grid. No email, no calls. I remember Kelsey looking at the photo of the ocean view. She did not look happy for me. She looked at the price tag listed on the website I had pulled up. That is a lot of money for one person, she had said, stabbing a carrot with her fork. It is a celebration, I had replied. I survived the merger at work. Well, just make sure you are back for the boys' recital in February, she had muttered, handing the phone back. She knew. She knew the dates. She knew the cost. She knew how much I needed it when she called me 3 days before my flight to demand I babysit. It was not because she forgot. It was because she remembered. She waited until the last possible second because she wanted to maximize the pressure. She wanted to test the strength of the trap. She wanted to see if her crisis could trump my joy one more time. But even with all this history, even with the pattern recognition flashing red lights in my brain, I made a fatal error in judgment. I assumed her retaliation would be emotional. I thought she would stick to the usual script bad-mouthing me to the cousins, making vague Facebook posts about selfish family members, and giving me the cold shoulder for a month. I did not think about the physical vulnerabilities I had left exposed. 5 years ago, when I first moved into my current apartment building, I had a health scare. I fainted in my kitchen from dehydration after a bout of the flu. It was scary enough that I decided someone needed to have emergency access to my place. I gave a spare key and the security code for the main door to the only person who lived nearby. I gave them to Kelsey. Just for emergencies, I had said, handing her the shiny brass key. Of course, she had said, tucking it into her purse. I will keep it safe. Over the years, I forgot about that key. I never asked for it back because, despite the toxicity, despite the resentment, A part of me still believed in the sister who bought me the milkshake. I thought that chapter of our lives, the protective chapter, was dormant, not dead. I thought there was a line she would not cross. I thought the sanctity of my home was a boundary that even her entitlement would respect. I was wrong. While I was packing my suitcase, thinking I had won the battle by simply refusing to engage, that key was sitting in her house, likely in a junk drawer or on a hook, waiting. I had closed the door on the argument, but I had left the door to my life wide open, and Kelsey was about to walk right through it. The phone rang again at 7 p.m. I knew before I looked at the screen that this was not going to be a casual chat. It was the summit meeting, the intervention, the final attempt to correct the behavior of the wayward daughter. I sat down on the edge of my bed, surrounded by half-packed cubes of clothing, and pressed the green button. I put it on speaker. I needed my hands free, mostly to wring them together in my lap. "We are on speaker, Amelia," my father said. His voice had that echoey quality that meant he was sitting at the kitchen table, the phone placed in the center like a totem of authority. "Your mother is here too." "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," I said. My voice sounded thin in the empty apartment. "We are disappointed," my mother said immediately. She did not sound angry, she sounded crushed, which was infinitely worse. "We raised you to be a supportive sister. We raised you to care about this family. What is happening to you? This is not the Amelia we know." I felt the familiar regression wash over me. I manage a team of 40 people. I control a budget of $2 million. I negotiate contracts with vendors who try to rip us off for every dime. But the moment my mother uses that tone, I am 16 years old again, grounded for coming home 10 minutes past curfew. "I am the same person," I said, trying to keep the wobble out of my voice. "I am just a person who needs a vacation. I have told you this. I am burning out. My doctor told me my cortisol levels are 3 times higher than they should be. If I do not take this week off, I am going to crash." "Your sister is crashing now," my father cut in. His voice was hard, the voice of the patriarch laying down the law. "Kelsey called us in tears. She is exhausted. Amelia, she has 2 young children. Do you know what that is like? Do you have any idea the physical toll that takes on a woman? She finally has a chance to reconnect with her husband, to save her marriage, and you are choosing a hotel room over her well-being." My phone buzzed against my leg. A text message. I glanced down. It was from Kelsey. "I hope you are happy making Mom cry. You are so cold." I flipped the phone face down. "It is not just a hotel room," I said, fighting the urge to scream. "It is $3,000. It is non-refundable. I booked this 6 months ago. I have paid for the flights. I have paid for the excursions. If I cancel now, I lose everything. I cannot just throw $3,000 into the fire because Kelsey did not plan ahead." "Money," my mother scoffed. "Is that what this is about?" "Money? We can give you money. Amelia, if you are so desperate for cash that you would sell out your sister. We will write you a check, but you cannot put a price tag on family loyalty." This was their favorite tactic. They took a logistical problem, the loss of significant income and time, and reframed it as a moral failing. If I cared about the money, I was greedy. If I cared about the time, I was selfish. "It is not about the money," I said, squeezing my eyes shut. "It is about the principle. It is about my mental health. I have not had a break in 3 years. "You are single," my father said. The words landed like stones. "You come home every night to a quiet apartment. You have your weekends. You have all the time in the world. Your sister has not slept through the night in 6 years. You do not get to talk about exhaustion." My phone buzzed again. Another text from Kelsey. "Must be nice to think the world revolves around you. Self-absorbed." I took a deep breath. I tried to pivot to logic. I tried to be the operations manager. "Okay," I said. "Let us look for a solution. If Kelsey needs childcare, I will help her find it. I have a subscription to a premium nanny service through my company benefits. These are vetted, background-checked professionals. I will pay for it. I will cover the cost of a full-time nanny for the entire week she's in Wisconsin. It will not cost her a dime." There was silence on the line. I thought, for a brief, foolish second, that I had won. I had offered a tangible solution. I was solving the problem. "A stranger," my mother said. Her voice was icy. "You want your sister to leave her babies with a stranger. They are professionals. Mom, they are certified." "They are not family," my father shouted. The volume made me jump. "You are their aunt. The boys know you. They trust you. Kelsey trusts you. How can you be so detached? You would rather pay someone else to do your duty than simply step up and help your flesh and blood." My phone buzzed. A third text. Why would I trust my kids with a random person when my sister is right there doing nothing? I stared at the screen. That was it. That was the core of it. Doing nothing. To Kelsey. And by extension to my parents. My life was not a life. My career was a hobby. My stress was imaginary. My time was a vacuum. Because I did not have a husband to cook for, or children to shuttle to soccer practice. They viewed my existence as a vast, empty field, waiting to be colonized by their needs. They did not see me as a woman with a demanding career and a desperate need for rest. They saw me as a spare part, a backup generator that was refusing to turn on during a blackout. "I am not doing nothing," I whispered. "I am surviving. I am trying to take care of myself so I do not end up in a hospital." "You are being dramatic," my mother said. "You are young. You can travel later. California will always be there. But this moment, your sister needing you, that is happening now. If you turn your back on her, you are breaking something that cannot be fixed." "I am not the one breaking it," I said. Kelsey knew I was leaving. She knew for months. Why is her lack of planning my emergency? Why am I the villain because I am sticking to a plan everyone agreed to? "Because you are the one who can change it," my father said. "You are the one with the flexibility. You are the one without attachments. It is your job to adjust. That is what family does. We adjust for the ones who are struggling. And right now, Kelsey is struggling. If you cannot see that, then maybe we have failed as parents." The guilt was suffocating. It was a thick, heavy blanket they were wrapping around my throat. They were experts at this. They knew exactly where to press to make me feel small, ungrateful, and cruel. "I cannot do it," I said. My voice was firm, though I felt like I was shaking apart inside. "I am getting on that plane on Monday morning. I am sorry Kelsey is in a bind, but I offered a solution, and she refused it. I am not canceling my life." The silence that followed was long and heavy. It stretched out for 10 seconds, then 20. I could hear my mother breathing. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in their kitchen across town. Then my father spoke. His voice was low, devoid of the anger from before, replaced by a cold finality that scared me more than the shouting. "Fine," he said. "You are an adult. You can make your own choices. But know this, Amelia. If you get on that plane, do not expect us to support you. Do not expect us to pretend this is okay. You are making a statement about where we stand in your life. You are choosing yourself over this family, and if you do that, you are on your own." It was an ultimatum. It was a severance. They were drawing a line in the sand, and they were putting me on the other side of it. I sat there, gripping the phone, looking at the dark window of my apartment. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and fast. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to fold. I wanted to say, "Okay, you win. I will stay." But then I looked at my suitcase. I looked at the itinerary printed on the nightstand. I looked at the 2 extra tickets tucked into the side pocket of my carry-on bag. The tickets I had bought 4 months ago. The tickets that cost me $2,000 extra. The tickets that had names printed on them, Diane Cooper and Richard Cooper. I wiped my face. A strange, sad smile touched my lips. They were disowning me for being selfish, for abandoning them, for choosing a luxury vacation over family connection. They had no idea what I had actually done. "Dad," I said softly. "Mom, before you hang up, listen to me. "We have heard enough," my mother said, her voice trembling. "No," I said, "you have not, because there is something I have not told you. There is something about this trip that you do not know." I paused. The air in the room felt electric. I could feel them hovering over the speakerphone, waiting for me to apologize, waiting for me to cave. "I never told you why I booked the larger suite," I said. "And I never told you who else is supposed to be on that flight with me. I am holding 2 electronic tickets in my email draft right now," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "They are for a flight departing Minneapolis at 8 in the morning on Monday. Seat 12A and Seat 12B. They are right next to mine." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It was not the silence of judgment this time. It was the silence of confusion. The sudden gear shift in the conversation had thrown them off their rhythm. They were ready for a fight, for a defense, for a slamming door. They were not ready for a gift. "What are you talking about?" my father asked, his tone losing its sharp, punitive edge and softening into genuine puzzlement. "I did not just book a trip for myself," I explained. Leaning back against the pillows of my bed, feeling the tension in my shoulders begin to unlock. Just a fraction. "I booked a family trip. I rented the 2-bedroom oceanfront suite at the Sanctuary Beach Resort. It has a full kitchen, a private deck, and direct access to the dunes. I paid for the whale watching tour for 3 people. I made reservations at the Chart House for 3 people." I took a breath. This was supposed to be a surprise. I wanted to give you both a Christmas present that actually meant something, but I could not get the booking until January. It is the 30th anniversary of when you guys took that road trip west. Remember, you always talked about going back. I wanted to take you back. I could hear the air change in the room on the other side of the city. The heavy, suffocating atmosphere of the intervention evaporated, replaced instantly by a sudden, chaotic intake of breath. You bought us tickets?" my mother asked. Her voice cracked. It was no longer the voice of the disappointed matriarch. It was the voice of a woman who had just been handed a winning lottery ticket. "To California. For next week. Everything is paid for," I said. "The flights, the hotel, the food. You do not have to spend a dime. I just wanted a week with my parents. I wanted us to relax. I have been planning this for 4 months. Oh, Amelia," my mother whispered. I heard the distinct sound of a sniffle. "I had no idea. Richard, did you hear that she planned a trip for us?" "I heard it," my father said. The sternness was completely gone, replaced by a sudden, boyish energy that I had not heard in years. "Monterey." "You are serious. We are going to Monterey." "Yes, Dad, we are going to Monterey." "Well, I will be damned," he laughed, a loud, booming sound that usually only came out after his 3rd beer on a Friday night. "Diane, where is the big suitcase, the blue one? Is it in the attic or the garage?" "It is in the guest closet," my mother said, her voice rising with excitement. "Oh my goodness, I have nothing to wear. Amelia, honey, why didn't you tell us sooner? We have to pack Richard. Check if your walking shoes are still good." It was a masterclass in emotional whiplash. 5 minutes ago, I was the selfish daughter abandoning her family in their time of need. I was the cold, unfeeling career woman who cared more about a hotel view than her own flesh and blood. Now, I was the golden child. I was the benefactor. The moral outrage about family duty and Kelsey's childcare crisis had vanished the second a better offer was placed on the table. It was a relief. Yes, but it also stung in a way I could not quite articulate. It proved that their anger was not a fixed moral stance. It was a transactional emotion. They were mad because I was withholding a resource, my time, from the family ecosystem. Now that I was providing a different, more luxurious resource, a free vacation. The ledger was balanced. I was forgiven. "So," I said, cutting through their chatter about sunscreen and windbreakers, "are you coming, or should I cancel the extra tickets?" "Of course we are coming," my father boomed. "Don't you dare cancel those tickets. We are going to see the Pacific Ocean Diane. Call the neighbors. Tell them to pick up the mail. Wait, my mother said, pausing. What about Kelsey? My stomach tightened. What about her? We have to tell her, my mother said. She thinks we are staying here to support her. We have to let her know we are going. You tell her, I said. I did not have the energy for round 2. Tell her I'm taking you on a trip. Tell her it was a surprise. I will call her right now, my mother said, sounding breathless and happy. She will understand. How can she be mad about something this wonderful? We will see you at the airport. Honey, oh, thank you. This is just... Thank you. They hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment, staring at the phone. I felt drained, like I had just run a marathon sprint. I had bought my freedom, and it had cost me $3,000 and 2 extra plane tickets. It was expensive, but as I listened to the quiet of my room, I decided it was worth it. 10 minutes later, my phone vibrated. I knew who it was. I did not even have to look. The text message appeared on my lock screen. It was short, it was sharp, it was classic Kelsey. Nice. So you can spoil them but not help me. There was no have a good trip. There was no, wow, that is generous of you to take Mom and Dad. There was only the bitter calculus of a woman who felt the world owed her everything. In her mind, the money I spent on our parents was money I had stolen from her. The time I was giving them was time I had subtracted from her. She did not see a daughter treating her aging parents. She saw a resource being diverted away from her needs. I stared at the text. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I thought about typing back. I thought about explaining that I had planned this before she ever mentioned her retreat. I thought about telling her that she was not entitled to my bank account, but I didn't. I realized that explaining myself to Kelsey was like trying to explain color to a man who refuses to open his eyes. She was committed to her narrative, to her. I was the villain, and this trip was just an elaborate way to spite her. I deleted the notification. I did not reply. I put the phone down and finished packing my bag. I was done begging to be understood. Travel day arrived with a gray, steel-colored sky over Minneapolis. I took an Uber to the airport at 5 a.m, my stomach churning with a cocktail of excitement and lingering dread. I kept checking my phone, expecting the other shoe to drop. I expected a barrage of texts from Kelsey. I expected a guilt trip voicemail. I expected her to show up at the terminal and scream at me in front of the TSA agents. But my phone stayed strangely quiet. There were no texts, no missed calls, no angry emojis. I met my parents at the check-in counter. They looked 10 years younger. My mother was wearing a bright floral scarf and new sunglasses, pushing her suitcase with a bounce in her step. My father was wearing his vacation hat, a beige fedora he only brought out for special occasions, and he was grinning like a schoolboy. There she is, my dad shouted, waving at me across the terminal. The traveler. They hugged me. They fussed over me. They told me I looked tired, and that the California sun would fix everything. They acted as if the conversation 3 nights ago had happened in a different lifetime. To different people, they were charming, funny, and warm. They were the parents I remembered from my childhood, before the family dynamics curdled into obligation and guilt. We got through security without issue. We boarded the plane. I sat in the window seat, with my mother in the middle and my father on the aisle. As the plane taxied down the runway and lifted off, leaving the frozen landscape of Minnesota behind, I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. The flight was smooth. My parents drank tomato juice and watched a romantic comedy on the seatback screens, holding hands across the armrest. I watched the clouds drift by, trying to let go of the tension in my neck. We landed in California just after noon. The air outside the terminal was different sweet, salty, and lacking the bite of winter. We picked up the rental car and drove down the coast, the Pacific Ocean opening up on our right side like a vast, glittering promise. By the time we checked into the hotel in Monterey, the transformation was complete. My parents were laughing. They were taking selfies on the balcony. They were debating which seafood place to try for dinner. My mother grabbed my hand as we watched the sunset over the dunes. "This is perfect, Amelia," she said, her eyes wet. "We really needed this. Your father and we have been so stressed lately. We needed to get away." "I am glad, Mom," I said, and I meant it. "And it is so nice of Kelsey to handle things back home so we could come," she added absent-mindedly. I know she was disappointed about her retreat, but she said she would make it work. She is a good sister. I stiffened slightly. She said that, well, she didn't say much, my mom admitted, watching the waves crash. She was brief, but she didn't yell. She just said she would handle it. I looked out at the ocean. The water was a deep, bruising purple in the twilight. Kelsey had not yelled. Kelsey had not texted. Kelsey, the woman who detonated nuclear explosions over a missed phone call, had simply said she would handle it and gone silent. My parents saw this as acceptance. They saw it as peace. They thought the conflict was resolved because the noise had stopped. But I knew better. I knew the rhythm of my sister's rage. When Kelsey was screaming, she was venting. When Kelsey was texting insults, she was looking for attention. But when Kelsey went quiet, when she stopped engaging, that was not surrender. That was strategy. I looked down at my phone one more time. Still nothing. No notifications. No drama. Just a blank screen. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Unrelated to the ocean breeze. I turned back to my parents, smiling as my father cracked a joke about the seagulls. But my mind was back in Minneapolis. In the quiet of my empty apartment, I didn't know the real invasion wasn't physical. I didn't know that while I was watching the sunset, my sister wasn't just sulking at home, she was busy, and her silence wasn't peace, it was planning. The air in Monterey tasted different than the air in Minneapolis. It was not just the absence of the biting frost or the smell of exhaust fumes. It was the texture of it. It was heavy with salt and moisture, smelling faintly of kelp and ancient cypress trees. For the first 24 hours, I did not just breathe it in, I drank it. I stood on the balcony of our hotel room, wrapping my cardigan tight around me against the coastal breeze, and watched the fog roll over the harbor like a slow white blanket. For 3 years, my shoulders had lived in a permanent state of elevation. Somewhere near my ears, braced for a crisis that never really ended, but here, watching the sea otters crack shells on their chests in the kelp beds below. I felt a physical dismantling of my own stress. It was a slow unraveling, my jaw unclenched, the knot in my stomach, which I had assumed was just a permanent part of my anatomy, began to loosen. It was not just me. Watching my parents was like watching a restoration video on the internet, where layers of grime and age are scrubbed away to reveal the bright colors underneath. My father, Richard, who usually spent his days frowning at the news or complaining about the cost of heating oil, turned into a man who stopped to read every historical plaque on Cannery Row. He bought a ridiculous hat with a picture of a crab on it. He ate a bowl of clam chowder that was the size of a hubcap and wiped his mouth with a napkin, grinning like he had just gotten away with a bank robbery. "This is the life, Amelia," he told me on the second day, leaning back in a plastic chair on the pier. I forgot what it felt like to not hear the phone ring. My mother, Diane, was even more transformed. Back home, she was the family switchboard, the anxiety dampener, the one who absorbed Kelsey's daily crises like a sponge. Here, she was just Diane. She drank white wine at lunch. She pointed out birds. She laughed at my dad's terrible jokes, a genuine, belly-deep laugh that made her look 10 years younger. "I needed this," she whispered to me as we walked through the aquarium, watching the jellyfish drift in their illuminated tanks. I did not realize how tired I was until we got on that plane. It was a validation of everything I had fought for. Every time I saw them smile, the guilt of the intervention phone call receded a little further. I told myself that this was right. This was necessary. We were healing, but the ghost of my sister was still there, haunting the periphery of our joy. On the third afternoon, We were sitting at a patio table overlooking the bay. My mother insisted on taking a selfie. She is not good at selfies. She always holds the camera too low. So we all end up with double chins. But she was so happy I did not have the heart to correct her. We squeezed together Dad in his crab hat, Mom with her windblown hair, and me in the middle, actually smiling with my teeth. She posted it to Facebook immediately. Family time in beautiful Monterey. So blessed to have this time with my husband and my daughter Amelia. I watched her hit post. Then, I did something I knew I shouldn't do. I opened the app on my own phone and waited. The likes started rolling in within minutes. The comments followed. Neighbors, cousins, old friends from church. Looks amazing. You guys deserve it. Have a glass of wine for me. I scrolled through them, my thumb flicking against the screen. I was looking for one name. I was looking for Kelsey. I knew she was online. Kelsey lived on her phone. She was the type of person who documented her coffee orders and her children's tantrums in real time. There was zero chance she had not seen the photo. 1 hour passed, then 2. Nothing. No comment. No odd face-it reaction. No passive-aggressive remark about how nice it must be to be on vacation while she was suffering. Her silence was louder than a siren. It was a void in the middle of the digital conversation, and its gravity was pulling me in. Is everything okay, honey? My mom asked, noticing me staring at my screen. Yeah, I lied, slipping the phone into my pocket. Just checking work emails. No work, my dad scolded, pointing a French fry at me. That is the rule. We are off the grid. Right, I said, forcing a smile. Off the grid. But I wasn't off the grid. I was tethered to it by a thin, invisible wire of anxiety. Throughout the trip, I kept checking my phone, waiting for the explosion. I expected a long, rambling text message detailing how the kids were sick, or how the house had flooded, or how I had ruined her marriage by not babysitting. I was prepared for the drama. I had rehearsed my calm, gray rock responses. The attack never came. My phone remained peaceful. The only notifications I got were from apps I rarely used. There were a few oddities, little digital glitches that I brushed off as the background noise of modern life. On Wednesday morning, I woke up to an email notification from a service I hadn't used in years, an old cloud storage account where I kept college photos. The subject line read, "Password reset requested." I frowned, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. I hadn't requested a password reset. I hovered my finger over the report as spam button. It was probably a bot. I reasoned. Hackers were always trying to brute force old accounts. I deleted the email without thinking twice about it. That afternoon, while we were driving down Highway 1 to see the Bixby Creek Bridge, my bank app pushed a notification to my lock screen. New device logged in. Minneapolis, Minnesota. If this was not you, please contact us immediately. My heart gave a little stutter step. Minneapolis. I unlocked my phone to investigate, but the signal on the coast was spotty. The app swirled and buffered, refusing to load. I stared at the spinning wheel of death, trying to be rational. "What's wrong?" my dad asked from the driver's seat. "Just a bank alert," I muttered. "Probably nothing." I thought about it. I had used the hotel Wi-Fi that morning to check my balance. Hotel networks were notorious for routing traffic through weird servers. Sometimes they made it look like you were in a different city, or maybe my laptop, which I had left in sleep mode back at my apartment, had woken up to run an update and pinged the server. Minneapolis. That was my home. It wasn't some random IP address in Russia or Nigeria. It was probably just my own computer syncing something. "Look at that view," my mother gasped. Pointing out the window at the sheer cliffs dropping into the churning Pacific, I looked up. The view was breathtaking. The ocean was a deep, mesmerizing turquoise. "Don't ruin this," I told myself. "Don't let your paranoia chase you around a hotel room 3,000 miles from home. If there was a real problem, the bank would call me. If there was a real emergency, my neighbors would call me." I closed the app. I shoved the phone deep into my purse. I decided, consciously and deliberately. To ignore it, I chose the view over the vigilance. I chose to trust that the safeguards I had in place, passwords, two-factor authentication, locks on my doors were doing their job. The rest of the week was a blur of golden light and seafood. We went to a vineyard in Carmel Valley and drank Pinot Noir in the sunshine. We walked on the beach at sunset. Collecting sand dollars, I watched my parents hold hands, something I had not seen them do since I was a teenager. I felt a profound sense of victory. I had done it. I had stood my ground. I had taken the trip, and the sky hadn't fallen. The world had not ended because Amelia Cooper took a week off. On the final night, we had a farewell dinner at a restaurant perched on the edge of the rocks. The waves were crashing directly below us, sending up sprays of mist that sparkled in the floodlights. We were drinking champagne, toasting to the trip. "To Amelia," my dad said, raising his glass. "Thank you, sweetheart. This was the best week I have had in 20 years. "To family," my mom added, her eyes shining. I clinked my glass against theirs. The champagne was cold and crisp. "I'm going to make some changes when I get back," I announced, feeling the liquid courage settle in my chest. "I am not going to work 60 hours a week anymore, and I'm not going to be the on-call crisis manager for Kelsey. I love her, but I am done being the backup plan." "We understand," my mom said, and for the first time, I believe she actually did. "You deserve your own life, Amelia." I went to bed that night feeling lighter than air. I packed my suitcase with a sense of order and satisfaction. I folded my clothes, tucking a bag of saltwater taffy for the office team in between my sweaters. I checked my flight status for the next morning. Everything was on time. I looked at my phone one last time before turning off the bedside lamp. Still no texts from Kelsey, no angry voicemails, just silence. I smiled in the dark. I thought I had won. I thought the silence meant she had finally accepted the boundary. I thought she was sulking. Sure, but that she had moved on to terrorizing someone else. I fell asleep to the sound of the ocean, dreaming of my new life, a life where I said no without guilt, a life where I was not available by default. I woke up the next morning, refreshed and ready to go home. I felt invincible. I didn't know yet that the war was already over, and I had lost. I didn't know that while I was dismissing bank notifications as travel glitches, my life was being surgically dismantled. I didn't know that the enemy wasn't storming the gates with a battering ram. She was walking through the back door with a key I gave her 5 years ago. I stood in the hotel lobby, waiting for the taxi, watching the California sun stream through the glass doors. I thought the hardest part of the trip was over. I didn't know the real invasion wasn't physical, it was digital. The transition from the golden, sun-drenched coast of California to the gray slush of Minneapolis was abrupt enough to give me emotional whiplash. The plane touched down at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport at 2 p.m, and the sky outside the oval window was the color of a bruised peach, heavy with low clouds and the threat of more snow. I walked through the terminal, dragging my carry-on bag, feeling a strange mixture of post-vacation blues and a renewed, steely resolve. I said goodbye to my parents at the baggage claim. They were still glowing, their faces relaxed and their movements unhurried. My father hugged me so hard my ribs creaked. "Thank you, Amelia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Really, thank you." "Go home and rest, Dad," I said, smiling. "I will call you tomorrow." I watched them walk toward the sliding glass doors, hand in hand. Before I turned toward the rideshare pickup zone, I felt good. I felt strong. I had spent 7 days breathing ocean air and ignoring the toxic frequency of my sister's demands. I had formulated a plan for my return. I was going to set office hours for my family. I was going to reclaim my weekends. I was going to be the Amelia I had been in Monterey, not the doormat I had been in Minneapolis. The Uber ride to my apartment took 40 minutes. I spent the time looking out the window at the familiar landmarks, the Mall of America. The frozen lakes, the skyline, and feeling a sense of ownership I had not felt in years. I was coming back to my life, but on my own terms. My building is a converted warehouse in the North Loop, a place with exposed brick walls and heavy industrial doors. It is usually a fortress of solitude. I dragged my suitcase into the lobby, nodding at the concierge who was busy on a call, and took the elevator up to the 4th floor. The hallway smelled of floor wax and old timber. I walked to door number 412, fished my keys out of my purse, and unlocked the deadbolt. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, dropping my keys into the ceramic bowl on the entryway table. "Home sweet home," I whispered to the empty air. At first glance, everything looked exactly as I had left it. The thermostat was set to 68 degrees. The plant by the window was a little droopy but alive. The silence was absolute. I kicked off my boots and rolled my suitcase into the bedroom. I started to unpack immediately, wanting to keep the momentum going. I hung up my coat. I threw my dirty laundry into the hamper. It was only when I walked back into the living room to get a glass of water that the subtle sense of wrongness began to prickle at the back of my neck. It wasn't a scream. It was a whisper. It was the way the pile of mail on the kitchen island was stacked. I am a creature of habit. When I sort mail, I stack it with the largest envelopes on the bottom and the standard letters on top, aligned by the corner. The pile sitting there now was messy, splayed out like a fan. I frowned. Walking over to it, I didn't remember leaving it like that. I picked up the top envelope. It was a utility bill. It had already been opened. A cold drop of unease landed in my stomach. I never opened bills until I was ready to pay them, and I certainly hadn't paid this one before I left. I looked around the room again. My senses suddenly sharpened to a razor's edge. The air felt disturbed, as if someone had walked through it recently. I walked over to my desk, the designated workspace where I spent most of my waking life. My docking station was empty. I stared at the black plastic rectangle. Blinking, my work laptop, a sleek silver machine that belonged to Northline Eventworks, should have been sitting there. I had left it closed. Charging. Waiting for my return. It was gone. "Okay," I said aloud, my voice trembling slightly. "Okay, maybe I hid it. Maybe I put it away." I checked the desk drawers. I checked the closet. I checked the safe I kept under the bed. The laptop was nowhere. Panic began to rise in my chest. A cold, dark water. I ran back to the living room and checked the media console. My personal iPad was missing. I checked the drawer where I kept my spare car keys. Gone. This wasn't a burglary. A burglar would have taken the television. A burglar would have taken the expensive espresso machine on the counter. A burglar would have trashed the place looking for cash. This was surgical. I rushed to the filing cabinet in my home office. This was the holy of holies. It was a heavy, fireproof metal cabinet where I kept the paperwork that proved I existed. I had locked it before I left. The lock cylinder was twisted. It wasn't broken, but it had been forced open with a key that didn't quite fit, or perhaps jiggled by someone who knew how to manipulate it. I yanked the top drawer open. My heart stopped. The green hanging folders were there, but the manila envelopes inside them were gone. My birth certificate, gone. My social security card, gone. My passport, gone. The folder labeled Tax Returns 2020 to 2025, gone. I stood there, gripping the edge of the metal cabinet, feeling the blood drain from my face. This was not just a theft. This was an erasure. Someone had walked into my home and scooped out the core of my identity. I needed to call the police. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen to wake it up. I stared at the top right corner, where there should have been 4 solid bars of signal and the LTE symbol. There was nothing, just 4 gray dots. And then, the text changed. SOS only. I frowned, tapping the screen frantically. I toggled airplane mode on and off. I walked to the window, holding the phone up to the glass. No SIM. "What?" I gasped. No. I tried to open my bank app. I needed to see if my accounts were safe. The app opened, but immediately asked for a 2-factor authentication code. "We have sent a 6-digit code to your number ending in 4492. I stared at the phone, No message appeared. No code arrived. My phone was a brick. It was a useless piece of glass and metal, because the number associated with it, the number that was the key to every digital lock in my life, was no longer mine. Panic was no longer a rising water. It was a tidal wave. I was drowning in my own living room. I couldn't call the police. I couldn't call my bank. I couldn't call my parents. I ran to the door, fumbling with the latch, and burst out into the hallway. I ran down the hall to apartment 414, Mrs. Gable. She was a retired librarian who watered my plants when I was away on long trips. She was usually home. I pounded on her door. Mrs. Gable, it is Amelia. Please. The door opened a crack, the chain still on. Mrs. Gable peered out, looking alarmed. Amelia. What is wrong? You look like you have seen a ghost. I need your phone, I choked out. Please, my phone is dead. I think I have been robbed. She undid the chain immediately and let me in. She handed me her landline handset, an old cordless model that felt heavy and archaic in my hand. I dialed the customer service number for my mobile carrier. I knew it by heart. I paced Mrs. Gable's floral carpet while the automated voice listed menu options. Finally, I got a human. This is Amelia Cooper, I said, my voice shaking. My phone says no SIM. I have no service. I need to know what is going on. There was the sound of typing on the other end. Security verification, please, the agent said. Last 4 digits of your social. I gave them. Thank you. Ms. Cooper, I see here that a request to transfer your number to a new eSIM device was completed last Tuesday. The notes say you called in and verified your identity using your passcode. Tuesday. I screamed. Mrs. Gable jumped. I was in California on Tuesday. I did not call you. I did not authorize a transfer. Ma'am, the verification was successful. The caller had your account PIN and your full billing address. It wasn't me. I was hyperventilating now. Reverse it. You have to reverse it right now. I can open a fraud investigation ticket, the agent said calmly, but it will take 24 to 48 hours to restore service to the original device while we investigate. I hung up. I didn't have 48 hours. Mrs. Gable, I said, turning to her. Can I use your computer? Please, I need to check my email. Of course. Dear, it is in the den. I sat down at her ancient desktop computer. The keyboard was clunky and loud. I navigated to my email login page. I typed in my username. I typed in my password. Enter the code sent to your mobile device. No, I whispered. Come on, I clicked. Try another way. Enter one of your 8-digit backup codes. I didn't have my backup codes. They were in a digital note on my phone, which was dead, or they were written down in a notebook, in my desk drawer, which I had just seen was rifled through. I closed my eyes, trying to think. Think, Amelia, you are an operations manager. You solve problems. There was one other option. Send a verification code to your recovery email. My recovery email was an old account I hadn't used since college, but I knew the password. And more importantly, Mrs. Gable's computer wouldn't trigger a 2-factor demand for that old account because I had never set it up with high security. I clicked it. I logged into the old account. I got the code. I punched it into the main login screen. My inbox loaded. It was a sea of red flags. There were dozens of unread messages. Bank of America new device alert. Chase suspicious activity detected. Experian new credit inquiry. Best Buy. Thank you for your purchase of $2,000, but the one that made the room spin, the one that made the floor drop out from under me, was a message from the HR department at Northline EventWorks. It was dated Wednesday. Subject resignation received. Next steps. Dear Amelia, we have received your formal letter of resignation, effective immediately. While we are shocked and disappointed by your sudden departure and the grievances listed in your letter, we accept your decision. Please arrange to return your company laptop, badge, and corporate credit card by the end of the week. Your access to company systems has been terminated as of Wednesday morning. Regards, Sarah Jenkins, VP of Human Resources. I stared at the screen. The white light burned into my retinas. I hadn't resigned. I loved my job. It was the only thing I had that was truly mine. Someone had logged into my life. Someone had taken my number. Someone had accessed my bank accounts. Someone had written a resignation letter, a letter apparently filled with grievances, and sent it from my own email address, blowing up my career in a single afternoon. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had burned my village. I sat back in Mrs. Gable's creaky office chair. My hands were numb. My breath came in short, jagged gasps. I thought about the key, the brass key I had given away 5 years ago for emergencies. I thought about the text message, niece. So you can spoil them but not help me. I thought about the silence, the terrifying, strategic silence of the last week. It wasn't a stranger. A stranger takes the TV. A stranger buys gift cards. A stranger doesn't write a resignation letter to your specific boss. A stranger doesn't know where you keep your social security card. I looked at the dark window, seeing my own reflection, pale and terrified. "Kelsey," I whispered. I sat in Mrs. Gable's den, surrounded by the smell of lavender potpourri and old paper. Staring at the blank screen of her desktop computer, my hands were shaking, not with the frenetic energy of panic, but with the cold, vibrating frequency of shock. I had just seen the email from Human Resources. I had just seen the alerts from the bank. The scope of the damage was massive, but the mechanism of the crime was still a mystery. Then I remembered the bookshelf. 6 months ago, after a package was stolen from the hallway of our building, the condo association had sent out a memo recommending residents upgrade their security. I had bought a small, discreet smart camera, a little white cube no bigger than a golf ball, and placed it on the top shelf of my living room bookcase. Nestled between a stack of travel guides and a potted succulent, I had set it up, connected it to the Wi-Fi, and then largely forgotten about it. It was set to record only when it detected motion. I turned to Mrs. Gable. "Can I access a website? I have a security camera. I need to see the feed." "Go ahead, dear," she said, wringing her hands in the doorway. "Do whatever you need." I navigated to the cloud storage website for the camera brand. I logged in using my backup email, thanking whatever providence had made me use a different password for this account than for my banking. The dashboard loaded. I clicked on the tab labeled Events. A calendar popped up. I clicked on Tuesday, the day my phone service had died, the day the bank alerts had started, the day I was 3,000 miles away. Drinking coffee on a balcony in Monterey, there were 14 events recorded between 9 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. I clicked the first video file. The timestamp read 9:15 in the morning. The video player buffered for a second, and then the image sharpened. It was a wide-angle shot of my living room. It was silent, ghostly, and still. Then, the front door opened. It did not burst open. There was no crowbar, no kicked-in lock, no masked intruder creeping in the shadows. The handle turned smoothly. The deadbolt slid back with a mechanical purpose. The door swung wide. And my sister walked in. Kelsey. She was wearing yoga pants and a gray oversized sweatshirt. Her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked exactly like she did when she dropped the kids off at school. She looked normal. She didn't look like a criminal. She looked like a woman stopping by to water the plants. She closed the door behind her and locked it. She didn't look around nervously. She didn't check the windows. She moved with the terrifying confidence of someone who believes they have a right to be there. I watched, my breath caught in my throat. As she walked into the frame, she wasn't looking for jewelry. She walked past the flat-screen television. She walked past the antique silver bowl on the dining table. She went straight to my desk. She sat down in my ergonomic chair and spun it around. She reached into her sweatshirt pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It looked like a list. I clicked to the next video. 9:30 in the morning. Kelsey was in the kitchen now. She had my filing cabinet drawer, the one I kept locked, sitting on the island. She had evidently found the spare key I kept hidden in the back of the junk drawer, a hiding spot I had foolishly shown her years ago. She was methodically going through my life. She pulled out my birth certificate. She placed it on the counter, smoothed it flat with her hand. and took a picture of it with her phone. She did the same with my Social Security card. She opened the folder labeled Tax Returns. She flipped through the pages, photographing the financial data, the routing numbers, the adjusted gross income. She wasn't rushing. She took a sip from a water glass she had pulled from my cupboard. She was hydrating while she stole my identity. I clicked the next video. 10:45 in the morning. This was the one that made my blood turn to ice. Kelsey was sitting on my sofa. She had my landline phone, which I kept for work emergencies, pressed to her ear. In her other hand, she held a sheet of paper that she was reading from. I turned up the volume on Mrs. Gable's computer speakers. The audio was tinny, but clear enough. "Yes, I am having trouble with my mobile device," Kelsey was saying. Her voice was pitched slightly higher, mimicking my professional tone. "My name is Amelia Cooper, date of birth, June 12th, 1992. She paused, listening to the person on the other end. "Yes, I can verify the billing address. It is 412 North Loop Drive. I need to authorize a SIM swap to a new device. My old phone was damaged." She was reading the script. She had prepared a script. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a crime of premeditation. She verified my Social Security number, reading it off the card she had just stolen. She verified my mother's maiden name. "Thank you," she said, smiling at the empty room. "I will wait for the confirmation email." I felt sick. Physically, violently sick. She had used my home, my phone, and my secrets to cut me off from the world. I clicked the next video. 2:14 in the afternoon. Kelsey was back at the desk. She had my laptop open. Since she had successfully hijacked my phone number, she had likely used the forgot password feature to reset my email access, and from there, she had reset the laptop login. She was typing. Her face was illuminated by the glow of the screen. She typed with a furious, rhythmic intensity. She wasn't just browsing, she was composing. I glanced at the HR email on the other tab. Received Wednesday, 2:14 in the afternoon. The timestamps matched perfectly. I watched my sister hit send. I saw her lean back in my chair, stretch her arms over her head, and let out a long breath. It wasn't a sigh of regret. It was a sigh of satisfaction. She had just resigned from my job. She had just torpedoed the career I had spent a decade building. And she looked as casual as if she had just finished booking a hair appointment. "Oh my God," Mrs. Gable whispered behind me. She had been watching over my shoulder. "That is your sister. I recognize her from the Christmas party." "Yes," I said, my voice hollow. "That is my sister." I knew what I had to do. I couldn't handle this alone, and I couldn't let my parents walk into this blind. They were still in the glow of the vacation, probably unpacking their souvenirs, completely unaware that the daughter they thought was holding down the fort had actually burned it to the ground. "Mrs. Gable, can I use your iPad to FaceTime my parents?" "My phone is—" I gestured to the useless brick in my pocket. "Of course." I dialed my father's number on the tablet. It rang 4 times. Then his face appeared, filling the screen. He was wearing his reading glasses and holding a mug of coffee. "Amelia," he asked, looking confused. "Why are you calling from— whose account is this?" "Dad," I said. "Is Mom there? I need you both to sit down, right now." "We are just unpacking," he said, smiling. "We found that bottle of wine we bought in Napa. We were thinking of coming over to see you later to—" "Dad," I cut him off. I cut. My voice was sharp enough to slice through his good mood. "Get Mom. Sit down. I have to show you something." He heard the terror in my voice. His smile vanished. "Diane, come here. It is Amelia." My mother appeared in the frame, looking worried. "Honey, what is it? Are you okay? Is it the flight?" "I am safe," I said, "but I have been robbed." "Robbed?" My mother gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh, my God. Did they take much? Did you call the police?" "I am going to call them in a minute," I said. "But first, you need to see who did it." I flipped the camera on the iPad around so it was facing the computer monitor. "Watch," I said. I played the clip of Kelsey entering the apartment. I played the clip of her photographing my social security card. I played the clip of her on the phone, impersonating me. I played the clip of her sending the resignation letter. I watched my parents' reflection in the monitor as they watched the footage. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. My mother's face went from confusion to denial to a crumpled, horrified grief. She shook her head, over and over again. "No," she whispered. "No, that is, maybe she was just looking for something. Maybe she needed a stamp. Amelia, there has to be an explanation. Maybe she was borrowing the laptop." "Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "She called the phone company and pretended to be me. She stole my identity. She emptied my bank account. She resigned from my job. Look at the timestamp, 2:14. That is when the email went to my boss." "She wouldn't," my mother sobbed. "She is your sister. She loves you. She was just, maybe she was confused. Maybe she was sleepwalking. People do strange things when they are stressed. She was grasping at straws, desperate to preserve the image of her family, desperate to not see the monster standing in my living room. But my father went silent. He watched the video with a terrifying intensity. He watched Kelsey smile as she impersonated me. He watched her drink my water. He saw the calculation. He saw the malice. His face turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. He sat back in his chair, and he looked old. He looked defeated. He didn't try to make excuses. He didn't try to soften the blow. He recognized the behavior. He recognized the entitlement he had spent a lifetime enabling, now grown into something predatory. "Richard," my mother pleaded, looking at him. Tell her there is a mistake." "There is no mistake. Diane," my father said. His voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a gavel. "That is not a mistake. That is a plan." "I am calling the police." "Dad," I said, turning the camera back to face me. "I have to." "I know," he said. He didn't tell me to wait. He didn't tell me to keep it in the family. He looked me in the eye, and I saw a profound apology in his gaze. "You do what you have to do, Amelia." I ended the call. I borrowed Mrs. Gable's landline again. I dialed 911. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I was in operations mode now. I was managing the crisis. "Emergency services," the dispatcher answered. "I need to report a felony theft and identity fraud," I said clearly. "I have video evidence of the perpetrator in my home. I have logs of unauthorized bank transfers. I have proof of wire fraud." "Is the perpetrator still there?" "No," I said, "but I know where she lives." 30 minutes later, a squad car pulled up to the curb. 2 officers came up to Mrs. Gable's apartment. One was a younger woman, Officer Perez, and the other was an older man with a tired face, Officer Miller. We went down to my apartment. I walked them through the scene. I showed them the disturbed mail. I showed them the empty docking station. I showed them the twisted lock on the filing cabinet. Then, I sat them down and played the footage. They watched in silence. Officer Miller took notes in a small spiral notebook. He noted the time of entry. He noted the document theft. He noted the phone call. When the video finished, Officer Miller closed his notebook. He looked around the apartment. Then he looked at me. His expression was grim. He had seen a lot of domestic disputes, a lot of family arguments that got out of hand. He was assessing whether this was something that could be mediated with a cooling-off period. "You said this is your sister?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Kelsey Ward. Does she have a key?" "I gave her one 5 years ago for emergencies," I said. "She did not have permission to be here this week. She definitely did not have permission to access my accounts or impersonate me." Officer Miller nodded slowly. He exchanged a look with Officer Perez. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious and official. "I need you to understand what we are looking at here. This is not a civil dispute. This isn't just a family conflict where someone borrowed a car without asking. He pointed to the screen where the frozen image of Kelsey holding my social security card was paused. Burglary, identity theft, wire fraud, computer fraud, impersonation, and considering the value of the assets you said were moved and the damage to your employment, we are well past the threshold for misdemeanors. He stood up and adjusted his belt. This is felony territory, Ms. Cooper. If we pursue this, your sister is not going to get a slap on the wrist. She's going to prison. I looked at the screen. I looked at the sister who had bought me a milkshake when I was 13. I looked at the sister who had decided that my life was simply fuel for her own. I understand, I said. The police left my apartment at 5 in the afternoon. They took the video files on a flash drive. They took my statement. They gave me a case number on a small white card. Then they left me alone in the silence. I did not cry. I did not collapse. I went to war. The next 6 hours were a blur of hold music and security questions. I sat at Mrs. Gable's dining table because I still had no internet of my own. I had a notebook open. I had a pen. I had a list of enemies. And for the first time in my life, my sister was at the top of it. First, the credit bureaus. I called Equifax. I called Experian. I called TransUnion. I need to freeze my credit. I told them. I am a victim of identity theft. I set up pins. I locked the doors to my financial life. Next, the phone carrier. I spent 45 minutes on the phone with a fraud specialist named David. He reversed the SIM swap. He killed the signal to the phone Kelsey was holding. He restored my number to my device. When my phone finally buzzed back to life in my hand, it felt like a weapon coming online. Then, the bank. This was the hardest call. The representative, a woman named Linda, read the list of transactions in a flat, apologetic voice. Transfer to external account ending in 558 $2,000. Transfer to Zelle recipient $500. Pending application for a Platinum Rewards Visa. Pending application for a personal line of credit $10,000. Stop it, I said, my voice cracking. Stop all of it. Close the accounts. We are freezing everything. Ms. Cooper. But the transfers have already cleared. We have to file disputes. It will take time. Time. That was the one thing I did not have. I hung up and dialed my boss. Or rather, my former boss. I called Sarah, the VP of HR at Northline EventWorks. It went to voicemail. Sarah, this is Amelia. I did not resign. My email was hacked. My home was burglarized. Please, do not process that letter. Call me back. I tried to log into my work email from my phone to rescind the resignation myself. Access denied. Your account has been disabled by the administrator. I tried my Slack app. You have been removed from this workspace. I stared at the screen. The text was red. It was final. Northline wasn't waiting for an explanation. They had received a resignation letter from a secure employee account, followed by immediate silence. To them, I was a disgruntled employee who had quit and ghosted. They had locked me out to protect their proprietary data. My career. The one thing I had built entirely on my own. The one thing Kelsey couldn't touch. Was hanging by a thread. I was currently unemployed. I was currently under investigation, and the burden of proof was on me to show I wasn't unstable. I sat there, shaking. The betrayal was total. She hadn't just taken money. She had tried to erase me. Then, my phone chimed. It was a text message. The number was familiar, but not saved anymore because I had wiped my contacts during the reset. But I knew the voice. You called the cops seriously over family. I stared at the words. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a physical blow. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't panicked. She was offended. In Kelsey's twisted version of reality, she was the victim. I was the aggressor for involving the authorities. To her, theft was just borrowing between sisters. Fraud was just fixing her situation. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to type a paragraph of rage. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to ask her how she could look our parents in the face. Don't. A voice inside me whispered, "That is what she wants. She wants the fight. She wants the drama. She wants to make this an emotional squabble so she can manipulate it." I took a breath. I lowered my thumb. I took a screenshot of the text. I saved it to a folder named Evidence. I did not reply. I put the phone down. The silence from my end was the only weapon I had left against her gaslighting. I would not give her the satisfaction of my anger. I would only give her the consequences of her actions. The next morning, the hammer dropped. Detective Miller called me at 9 o'clock. "Ms. Cooper," he said, "we obtained a warrant based on the video footage and the confirmation from your cellular provider regarding the fraudulent impersonation." "Did you find her?" I asked. I was standing in my kitchen, staring at the empty spot where my laptop used to be. "We executed a search warrant at your sister's residence an hour ago." I closed my eyes. I could imagine it. The quiet suburban street, the neighbors watching from behind curtains, the police cruiser in the driveway where Kelsey usually parked her SUV. "We recovered your property," Miller said. His voice was professional, clipped. "We found the laptop. We found the iPad, and we found the document folder." "Where were they?" I asked. "Was she hiding them in a safe?" Miller paused. There was a rustle of paper on the line. "No, ma'am. The laptop was on the coffee table. The document folder, your birth certificate, social security card, tax returns was in a kitchen cabinet, top shelf, next to the baking supplies." I let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. She hadn't even hidden it. She had treated my identity like a box of pasta. She had shoved my life next to the flour and sugar, as if it were just another household ingredient she was entitled to use whenever she wanted to bake a cake. It wasn't a heist. It was a pantry raid. "There is more," Miller said. "We found a notebook. It appears to be a planning document. It has your personal information written out, passwords she guessed, answers to security questions, and we found a printed draft of the resignation letter." "She practiced it," I whispered. "It looks that way. There were handwritten edits on the paper. She was trying to get the tone right. She wanted it to sound like you, but angrier." "Is she in custody?" "Yes. We arrested Kelsey Ward at 10:15 this morning. She is being booked at the county jail as we speak. Charges are identity theft, first-degree burglary, wire fraud, and computer tampering. The district attorney is looking at the resignation letter as malicious intent to cause damages." I sank onto the floor. I sat on the cold hardwood, pulling my knees to my chest. It was real. My sister was in handcuffs. My sister was in a cell. I thought about my nephews. I thought about my parents, who were probably still asleep in the guest room of my apartment, oblivious to the fact that their other daughter was being fingerprinted. "Did she say anything?" I asked. "When you took her?" I needed to know. I needed to know if there was remorse. I needed to know if, when the reality of the law crashed down on her, she finally understood what she had done. "She did," Miller said. His voice hardened. "Usually, suspects stop talking when we cuff them. They ask for a lawyer. Your sister." "She wanted to talk. What did she say?" "She looked at me," Miller said, reading from his notes. "And she said, 'She deserved it. She left me stranded.'" The line went dead in my ear. "She left me stranded." I lowered the phone. She didn't care about the felonies. She didn't care about the fraud. In her mind, the crime wasn't stealing my identity. In her mind, the crime was that I had gone on vacation. I had broken the contract of servitude. I had refused to be the backup plan. And because I had dared to be unavailable, because I had dared to own my own time. She felt justified in owning my life. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the gray city. I wasn't a sister anymore. I was a victim. And she wasn't a sister anymore. She was a defendant. I dialed my lawyer. It was time to make sure she stayed one. The legal process is not like it is on television. It is not fast. It is not glamorous. And it is not clean. It is a slow, grinding machinery of paperwork and fluorescent lights, where the truth is not revealed in a dramatic monologue, but peeled back in layers of humiliating bureaucratic detail. In the weeks following Kelsey's arrest, her story did not just change, it evolved, mutating like a virus trying to find a host that would accept it. I read the transcripts of her police interviews. Detective Miller let me see them because, as the victim, I needed to understand what I was up against. In the first hour after her booking, Kelsey sat in the interrogation room, her mascara running, and played the part of the concerned sister. "I was just checking on her place," she told the officers, her voice trembling. "Amelia is fragile. She has been under so much stress at work. I was worried she might have left the stove on or left a window open. I have a key. She gave it to me. I went in to make sure everything was safe." When they showed her the video of her photographing my Social Security card, the story shifted. "Well, she lets me use her information sometimes." Kelsey pivoted, her eyes narrowing. "We help each other out. I needed to verify something for a loan application for our parents, and Amelia said I could grab the info. It was a misunderstanding." When they played the recording of her call to the mobile carrier, where she impersonated me to steal my phone number, the story fractured completely. She didn't apologize. She didn't cry. She got angry. "I was protecting her," she shouted at the detective. "She is reckless. She was spending all this money on a trip she couldn't afford, blowing her savings on a luxury hotel while her family is struggling. I took control of her accounts to stop her from ruining herself. I was trying to be the responsible one." It was a masterclass in gaslighting. In Kelsey's mind, stealing my identity was an act of benevolence. She had convinced herself that robbing me was actually a form of financial guardianship, but facts are stubborn things, and Detective Miller was a man who preferred timelines to tantrums. He laid it out for the district attorney, and he laid it out for me. The timeline was a pristine, unbreakable chain of evidence. "Tuesday, 9:15 in the morning entry," Miller said, pointing to the whiteboard in his office. "Tuesday, 10:45 in the morning, SIM transfer initiated. Tuesday, 2:14 in the afternoon, resignation letter sent. Tuesday, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, first transfer of funds." "She claimed she needed the money for childcare," I said, staring at the timeline. "She told Mom she was desperate because I wouldn't babysit." Miller looked at me, his expression pitying. He slid a folder across the desk. It was a financial forensic report on Kelsey and Brent Ward. "It wasn't about childcare, Amelia. That was just the excuse she used to make you feel guilty. The reality is much simpler and much uglier." I opened the folder. The numbers swam before my eyes. $75,000, Miller said. "That is the amount of credit card debt your sister and her husband are currently carrying. They have 5 maxed-out cards. They are 3 months behind on their mortgage. Their cars are at risk of repossession." I felt the air leave my lungs. I knew they lived well-new cars, nice clothes, dinners out, but I assumed they could afford it. I assumed Brent's job paid well. "They have been living on a cliff edge for 2 years, Miller explained, robbing Peter to pay Paul. But Peter ran out of money. Her credit score is in the 400s. She couldn't open a new card if her life depended on it. She didn't need you to babysit, Amelia. She needed your credit score. She needed a fresh host." That was the moment the childcare narrative died. It wasn't a desperate mother trying to cover a gap. It was a drowning woman climbing on top of me to breathe. And she wasn't alone. Brent, my brother-in-law, the man who always claimed to be neutral, cracked under the pressure of the investigation. He wasn't charged with the theft directly, but the police brought him in for questioning regarding the sudden influx of cash into their joint account. "I didn't know the details," Brent stammered in his recorded interview, sweating through his dress shirt. "Kelsey handles the finances. She told me she got a bonus. She told me Amelia loaned us some money to help with the mortgage." "You saw her with a new laptop," the detective pressed. "You saw her with a folder of documents that weren't hers. You saw $2,000 hit your account on a Tuesday. You didn't ask a single question." I didn't want to know," Brent admitted, looking at the floor. Willful blindness. He knew she was doing something illegal, But as long as the mortgage got paid, and he didn't have to look at the crime, he was happy to eat the fruit of the poisonous tree. The consequences for Kelsey began to snowball, and they were public. News of the arrest reached her employer within 48 hours. Kelsey worked as an office administrator for a mid-sized logistics firm. It was a job that required handling sensitive employee data and company credit cards. When the police report listed charges of identity theft, wire fraud, and computer tampering, her company did not hesitate. She was fired for cause immediately. They didn't want an employee who was facing felonies for defrauding her own sister anywhere near their payroll system. I heard about it from a mutual acquaintance. Kelsey was telling people she was let go due to a family misunderstanding. She was still spinning the web, even as it was being torn down. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a rainy Tuesday in February. I walked into the courthouse flanked by my lawyer. I wore a charcoal suit. I kept my head high. I had spent the last 3 weeks fighting to restore my life, meeting with bank managers, filing affidavits, convincing Northline Eventworks to unlock my account and suspend the resignation pending the investigation. I was exhausted, but I was functioning. The courtroom was cold and smelled of floor polish and stale coffee. I sat in the front row on the left side, the designated area for victims and their families. My parents were there. Diane and Richard Cooper sat directly behind me, in the past. Whenever Kelsey was in trouble, a fender bender, a dispute with a neighbor, my parents would have been sitting behind her. They would have been holding her hand, telling her it would be okay, paying for her lawyer. Not today. Today. They sat behind me. My mother looked 10 years older than she had in Monterey. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes red from weeping. My father sat with his arms crossed, his jaw set in a line of granite. He stared at the back of Kelsey's head, which was visible at the defense table, but he did not move toward her. The video footage had broken them. Seeing their daughter casually impersonate me, seeing the premeditation, had shattered the illusion of the poor, overwhelmed Kelsey. They could not defend this. There was no both sides to identity theft. When the judge entered, the room went silent. The charges were read aloud. Count 1, identity theft in the first degree. Count 2, burglary in the first degree. Count 3, wire fraud. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Miss Vance, stood up to address the court regarding bail and the severity of the allegations. "Your Honor," Ms. Vance said, her voice ringing clear in the high-ceilinged room. "This was not a crime of opportunity. This was a systematic dismantling of the victim's life. The defendant did not just steal money. She utilized her knowledge of the victim's personal history to bypass security questions. She accessed the victim's employer's system and sent a fraudulent resignation letter." The judge, a stern man with wire-rimmed glasses, looked up from his file. "A resignation letter." "Yes, Your Honor." Ms. Vance continued, "The state argues that this demonstrates malicious intent beyond simple theft. The defendant attempted to destroy the victim's livelihood. She tried to sever the victim's source of income, effectively ensuring the victim would have no resources to fight back. This was a calculated attempt to ruin the victim's professional standing permanently." A murmur ran through the courtroom. This was the detail that turned stomachs. Stealing money is greed. Trying to get someone fired is hate. I looked at Kelsey. She was wearing a navy blue dress, trying to look demure. She was whispering frantically to her public defender. She looked agitated, not remorseful. She kept glancing back at our parents, trying to make eye contact, trying to summon the tears that usually worked so well. But Diane and Richard were looking at their hands. They were looking at the floor. They were looking anywhere but at her. Kelsey realized then that she had lost them. The realization hardened her face. She turned her head and looked at me. Our eyes met across the aisle. I expected to see shame. I expected to see fear. I expected to see a silent plea for mercy, a sister begging a sister to make it stop. I saw none of that. Her eyes were cold, filled with a sharp, venomous resentment. She looked at me with pure disgust. In that look, she told me everything I needed to know. She didn't hate herself for what she did. She hated me for catching her. She hated me for having the things she wanted, the job, the credit score, the freedom. She hated me for the vacation. She hated me for the boundaries. Most of all, she looked at me like I was the criminal. Her expression screamed the accusation, "How dare you? How dare you embarrass me like this? How dare you not just let me take what I needed? You have so much. And you wouldn't share. You are the selfish one." It was the look of a parasite that is angry the host has an immune system. The judge set bail at $50,000. Kelsey didn't have $50,000. Brent didn't have $50,000. And for the first time in history, my parents did not reach for their checkbook. "Bail is set," the judge said, banging the gavel. As the bailiff moved to escort Kelsey back to the holding cell, she passed within 5 feet of me. She didn't stop, but she leaned in, just enough for her voice to carry to my chair. "I hope you are happy," she hissed. "You ruined everything." I sat there, freezing cold despite the wool of my blazer. I watched them take her away. I felt my mother's hand touch my shoulder, a light, trembling weight. "I am so sorry. Amelia," my mom whispered. "I am so sorry." I took my mother's hand, but my mind was reeling with a new, devastating clarity. For years, I thought the conflict with Kelsey was about labor. I thought it was about babysitting. I thought she resented me because I didn't help enough with the kids, or because I didn't visit enough. I thought if I just did more, if I gave more time, more effort, more love, it would be enough. But as I looked at the empty defense table, I realized I had been wrong the entire time. It wasn't about babysitting. It wasn't about the kids. It wasn't even really about the money. It was about ownership. Kelsey believed she owned me. She believed that because we shared DNA, my life was a subsidiary of hers. She believed my time, my money, and my identity were assets she could liquidate whenever her own bad choices caught up with her. She didn't want a sister. She wanted a spare battery, and the moment I disconnected, the moment I said, "This is mine," she didn't just get mad. She tried to repossess the property. I walked out of the courtroom into the winter sunlight, finally understanding the war I had been fighting. I had lost a sister. Yes, but I had saved myself. The day of the sentencing hearing arrived in early June. The snow in Minneapolis had long since melted, replaced by a humid, sticky heat that made your clothes cling to your skin the moment you stepped outside. I walked into the courtroom feeling a strange sense of detachment. I was not nervous anymore. I was not angry anymore. I was simply done. The plea deal had fallen apart because Kelsey refused to admit to the malicious intent clause regarding my employment. She insisted, to the bitter end, that the resignation letter was a misunderstanding and not a targeted attack. So, we were here for the judge to hear her statement before passing sentence. I sat next to my lawyer. My parents sat behind me. They were quiet. They had aged 5 years in the last 5 months. My father walked with a stoop now, and my mother's hands had developed a permanent tremor. They were no longer the enablers of the family dynamic. They were the collateral damage. Kelsey stood up when it was her turn to speak. She did not look at me. She smoothed the front of her skirt, took a deep breath, and began to speak to the judge. I expected tears. I expected a performance, but I did not expect the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of what came out of her mouth. "Your Honor," Kelsey said, her voice steady and clear, "I stand here today as a mother who has been pushed to the brink by a society that offers no support to parents. I made mistakes, I admit that. I used resources that were not technically mine because I was drowning. My husband and I were drowning in debt, trying to provide a stable home for 2 little boys." She paused, letting the silence hang in the air, before pointing a finger toward the table where I sat. "My sister," she continued, her voice hardening, "has no dependents. She has no mortgage. She has a lucrative career and spends her money on luxury vacations and expensive hotels. She is free. She is selfish. And when I reached out for help, when I begged for support, she turned her back on me. I did what I had to do to survive. I borrowed her credit because she wasn't using it. I stepped into her life because she has so much empty space in it. I am being punished today not because I'm a criminal. but because I am a desperate mother who loves her children too much." The courtroom was dead silent. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, stiffened beside me. I felt a wave of nausea roll through my stomach. She was not apologizing. She was framing her felony as a moral crusade. She was arguing that my success was a sin and her theft was a virtue. The judge, a woman named Justice Caldwell, stared at Kelsey over the rim of her glasses. She did not look impressed. She looked disgusted. "Is that all, Ms. Ward?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Kelsey said, sitting down with the air of a martyr who has just delivered a sermon. "Mr." Henderson stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. He looked at the judge, then at Kelsey, then back at the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "the defense characterizes this as a desperate, one-time act of a drowning woman, a momentary lapse in judgment caused by recent financial strain. However, the prosecution would like to submit one final piece of evidence into the record before sentencing, evidence that was uncovered during the forensic audit of the defendant's computer hard drive." He walked to the bench and handed a file to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. 3 years ago, Mr. Henderson said, turning to face the courtroom. Long before the defendant was drowning in her current debt, and long before the victim booked a trip to California, a credit card was opened in the name of Amelia Cooper. It was a small limit card, $500. It was opened online, using the victim's social security number. I froze. I stared at my lawyer. I had never heard about this. The card was used to pay for online shopping. Mr. Henderson continued. Cosmetics, clothes. It was paid off and closed within 6 months. The statements were sent to a distinct email address, kelseyward88@gmail.com. This was not a desperate act of survival. Your Honor, this was a test run. The defendant has been using her sister's identity as a personal piggy bank for years. She just kept the amount small enough to stay off the radar. Until now. A gasp came from the row behind me. I turned around. My mother, Diane, was pressing her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were wide with a horrifying realization. "Oh my God," my mother whispered, loud enough for the back of the room to hear. "The student loan paperwork." Everyone turned to look at her. My father put a hand on her arm, but she shook him off. 3 years ago, my mother stammered, tears spilling down her cheeks. Kelsey told me she was helping Amelia reorganize her student loans. She said she needed Amelia's file. I gave it to her. I gave her the folder. I thought she was helping. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Diane Cooper, the woman who had spent her life trying to keep the peace, had unwittingly handed the weapon to the attacker. She had given Kelsey my social security number. Thinking it was an act of sisterly love, Kelsey had used it to open a credit card to buy makeup. Kelsey's face turned paper white. The martyr mask crumbled. The narrative of the desperate mother evaporated, replaced by the ugly truth of a habitual predator. She wasn't saving her family. She was practicing her craft. Justice Caldwell looked up from the file. Her expression was made of stone. "Ms. Ward," the judge said, "your statement regarding your motives is hereby rejected by this court. This was not an act of desperation. It was an act of entitlement. You have preyed upon your own sibling with a level of calculation that is frankly chilling." The gavel came down hard. "I sentence you to 5 years of probation. You are ordered to pay full restitution of $4,200 to the victim, plus legal fees. You are ordered to complete 200 hours of community service. You will attend mandatory financial counseling and psychological therapy." The judge leaned forward. "And I am issuing a permanent order of protection. You are to have no contact with Amelia Cooper, no calls, no texts, no emails, no third-party contact. If you violate this order, you will serve 18 months in state prison. Do you understand?" "Yes," Kelsey whispered. She looked small now, defeated. "We are adjourned." The aftermath was not a celebration. It was a quiet, necessary demolition. My Human Resources Department received the official court documents 2 days later. Sarah, the VP of HR, called me personally. She apologized. She told me the resignation was expunged from my record. She offered me my job back, with a raise, and full reinstatement of my benefits. I took the job, but I set new terms. I told them I would no longer answer emails after 6 in the evening. I told them I would no longer work weekends. I had learned the hard way that being always available was a vulnerability, not a virtue. I rebuilt my life with the precision of an architect. I changed the locks on my apartment again, installing a high-security digital system that required a biometric scan. I paid a service to scrub my personal information from data broker websites. I placed a permanent freeze on my credit reports at all 3 bureaus. The hardest part was the family. The no-contact order was a piece of paper, but the reality was a chasm that split the family down the middle. I could not see my nephews. I could not be the cool aunt who brought them gifts. I had to love them from a distance, because their mother was dangerous to my existence. I sent birthday presents to my parents' house, and my parents delivered them. I never wrote a note. I never sent a text. I kept the wall high and thick. My parents changed, too. The lecture about family first vanished from their vocabulary. The guilt trips stopped. They started coming to my apartment for dinner once a week. Just the 3 of us. We didn't talk about Kelsey. We didn't talk about the trial. We talked about art. We talked about politics. We talked about my work. They treated me, for the first time, like an adult woman who was separate from them. They treated me with a fragile, terrified respect. They knew now that they could lose me not to a job or a city, but to the silence that follows betrayal. They walked on eggshells, not out of fear of me, but out of fear of their own past negligence. 6 months after the trial, I booked a trip. It wasn't to a beach this time. I rented a cabin in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee. It was isolated. It was quiet. It had no Wi-Fi. I didn't tell my parents, maybe. I didn't ask if it was a good time. I sent them the dates and said, I will be gone for 10 days. I packed my bag. I drove down. I sat on the porch of the cabin, wrapped in a blanket, drinking coffee and watching the mist rise off the mountains. My phone was inside, turned off. I didn't feel the phantom vibration in my pocket. I didn't feel the urge to check my bank account every hour. The anxiety that had stalked me for years, the feeling that I was forgetting something, that I was failing someone, that I was one phone call away from disaster was gone. I realized something as I watched the sun break through the fog. Peace isn't something you earn by being good enough or helpful enough. Peace is something you choose by building walls strong enough to keep the chaos out. I had lost a sister. I had lost the illusion of a happy, cohesive family, but I had found the person I was supposed to be before I started carving off pieces of myself to keep everyone else warm. Kelsey was right about one thing in her speech. Though she meant it as an insult, she said I was free. She was right. I was free, and I was never going back to the cage of obligation again. The lesson I learned cost me thousands of dollars and broke my heart, but it is the most valuable thing I own. Family is not a license to steal your time, your labor, or your identity. Blood is not a blank check. And as I sat there in the mountains, I finally understood the truth that had been hiding in plain sight for 33 years. The most shocking part of this entire nightmare wasn't losing the money, or the job, or the trust. It was realizing that Kelsey never actually wanted my help. She wanted control. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop a comment below sharing your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the channel Kate Revenge Stories, hitting that like button, and pressing the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who might need to hear it. Stay safe, and remember to protect your peace.